We go. What's up, YouTube? I'm here today. It's fantastic Sunday. It is Mother's Day, and we're here with Elijah Elliot, the author and speaker of the book, The Hierarchy of Needs. And is that the name of it? And it's going to be coming out. Hierarchy of Existence.
Yes, sir. Yep.
Hierarchy of Existence. And what we're going to be discussing today is how to have a successful relationship in dealing with women. So, Elijah, you've got some experience. You've been through some battles. What makes you what makes you someone that add value in this? How do you know um how do you know about this kind of stuff? Give us a little backstory, summary.
Well, um, technically speaking, I don't think that I would have any uh, relative credentials on the matter. However, I have a lot of life experience, um, probably some pretty good examples of what not to do, and also some pretty good examples of what works for people that have had long-term relationships, um, as well as I've ingested quite a few books as far as relationship books and all that. So this has been a topic of interest of mine for quite a while, not only in the relationship realm, but the just overall communication and developing um, friendships, things along those lines. Any kind of relationship between two human beings, rather. So a lot of this stuff kind of ties into each other in different areas. It's just when you're talking about relationships between spouses, I would say that you're getting a lot deeper into the weeds there.
I think when I talk to someone who tries to give me advice and they never have been through what I've been through, I kind of like
Mhm.
I'm a little bit resentful. I used to have people that were married always try to give me advice, or someone overweight and they try to give me advice, and I'm like, man, you have no idea. You're trying to tell me what it's like, and you've never been through it. So I think the degree is not as important as the battle scars.
Yes.
So it's just like people try to speak into your life when they have sympathy, but they have empathy. They don't have any empathy. They don't know what it feels like, yet they feel sorry for you. So,
Hmm.
so and that's really not a good place where I will sit there and take advice. So yeah, man, I think it's good. When today's what's going on with today is like is there really an incentive to even date, to even talk to women, with the Me Too movement and the fact that you can get arrested for an accusation? I mean, isn't even worth to even bother like talking and approaching?
Um, I mean, I would say ultimately yes. However, that being said, because of the situation that our society is in with all of this, it makes it very difficult to find or even engage in a genuine um, any genuine relationships. It's difficult because so many, and this is my opinion, so many people nowadays are conditioned to take. And what I mean by that is one of the things that I discuss in my book is there's everything is twofold, or you could say everything has a bit of a spectrum to it, right? And we interact with our each individual person interacts with their reality, the world that they live in two ways. They give and they take. Okay. You're putting things out into the world, whether you realize it or not, you are just by your simple existence. And then you're taking. you're perceiving things or you're consuming things, right? Well, we live in a very consumeristic society now where everything is all about consuming. You do things for me, I don't do things for you anymore. And then that's kind of how it is. And the only time that people are
What
doing things for other
what's in
people is
it
to
for
make money.
me? What's in it
Exactly.
for me? Right?
Exactly. So
Yeah.
usually there's none of this voluntary servitude. Well, I can't say that none, but there's very little voluntary servitude anymore. And it's not the norm. And personally, I think that just creates a very toxic society. And it's just one of those where, I'm not going to do anything for you unless you give me something in return. Usually it's monetary, whatever that, something like that. But um, to to use that as a segue into the relationship realm, I think that's probably a large part of why most relationships fail is because they're not equally yoked. They're they're not both people are not pulling their own weight, or more to my point, they're not helping the other person pull their weight. So if you have two people, and say if you have a husband and a wife, and their daily goal every single day, their primary focus. Now, I understand you need to take care of yourself to the most extent, hygiene, sleep, exercise, diet. You need to make sure you got a good self talk going on, your psychology, things like that. You got to work on. But everything beyond that, if you were to make your primary focus serving your spouse, and both people were to do that. So if the husband makes his primary focus to serve his wife, and the wife makes her primary focus to serve the husband, to make sure that the husband is making sure that he can, in any way that he can, to meet her needs, any needs that she might have. And then vice versa, if she is making sure that in any way that she can, her goal is to meet any needs that he has. I think that if you have a relationship that does that, or two people in a relationship that do that, that creates the perfect symbiotic system. So it's now we're no longer he versus her, it's us versus the problem, whatever that problem might be. Maybe you got some finances going on, maybe you got some, I don't know, anything, right? Any external thing.
Well,
Now it becomes two people together as a team.
yeah, I think it's like I think the relationship is like a garden. Because that's one of the things with my future wife. We had an argument this morning, and she's like, "Oh, I don't want to talk about it." I said, listen, I said the fact that you're telling me you don't want to talk about it now, I want to talk about it because I think that's what it is like people are afraid of confrontation because they're afraid of how the other person's going to react. And the moment you bring fear into the racial relationship, the moment you're like, "Oh, okay, um, I don't want to confront her. I'm afraid how she's gonna act." I'm like, dude, what are you? Are you a vagina? Like, why are you afraid of anything? I should not be afraid to talk to my wife. Like, you have to, as a man, I think you need to be secure in your position. I think you need to know who you are, and you're never gonna know who you are until you're battle tested. And this is why I tell guys, I said, listen, you need to get into sports, you need to get into doing hard things because when you're stripped away of the money, when you're stripped away of your strength and you're battle tested, you really find out who you really are. Now that journey for me was ayahuasca. That's really was something where I really just was just stripped and there was nothing that I could left. And I found out who I really was. I found out that I really loved Jesus. I really loved the Lord, and that was very important to me. But I think you won't get to that place of security and peace unless you go through that darkness, unless you go through that. Now, that was my journey. Some people maybe they might want to run a marathon, or maybe they want to take up boxing, whatever that journey is. But I think we're as men, we have a mandate to where you need to be battle tested. And I think a lot of guys are afraid of that. And that's just why I don't necessarily blame the woman. I blame the men for their lack of leadership, the lack of being able to face confrontation. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, you bring up a very good point about knowing who you are, knowing your morals, knowing your really being in touch with your identity and being solid in that. So if you know who you are and you know what you're very familiar with your identity, you're less likely to worry about what other people are going to say or think about you because you know who you are. Um, so that is important. So to the example of if someone's afraid to say something to you or bring something up because they're afraid of uh, it negatively impacting your perception of them, then they're not very steadfast in their who they believe they are because they're concerned with that doubt. Probably they're worried that they're going to get some sort of negative affirmation about something. However, I think that if a person is worried about that, there's two problems there. One, we've already stated that they're not um, they've not defined their identity well enough. They're not firm in their understanding of themselves. The second thing is kind of how I was saying earlier. They're not thinking about the other person. They're only thinking about themselves. So I think that would be important to where it we need to be able to bring up these tough topics with other people because if I have a problem, say like just me and you, just as friends, right? It doesn't have to be any kind of relationship. It could just be anything between two people. If I have a problem that I want to bring up, hey, you said something to me the other day that it got under my skin and it's been bothering me, right? And I'm afraid to bring it up to you for fear of confrontation.
I'd probably
That's
punch
just that's just going to eat at me though, right?
being
That's
afraid.
just going to bug me. And if I don't address it,
Right,
then that thought is going to start snowballing in my mind
right,
and it's going to negatively affect my perception of you.
right.
Okay.
Resent,
Now,
resentment.
what about yeah, exactly. Now, what about if I were to put that focus on you instead? And what I mean by that is I have this negative perception that's starting to develop towards my friend.
Mhm.
I'm pretty confident that I can speak on his behalf and say that he does not want people to think of him negatively. Most people don't, right?
That makes
So if
sense.
I were to think about that instead of what is he going to think about me if I bring it up, I say, hey, man, this is what happened. This is how I feel about it. 9 times out of 10, most people are like, hey, man, I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. That was not how I intended that to go down. That's not how I meant it. It's maybe we find out it's a gap in interpretation between a something that was said, right? Um, but that allows for that growth and that strengthening of the bond between the two people. If I put my focus on the other person instead of myself, say, hey, what does this person need? They probably want to. They have the need for acceptance. That's one of the human needs. And if I don't bring it to their attention that, hey, the thing that you did is robbing you of being able to effectively meet that need, then I'm effectively myself. If I don't bring it up, I'm robbing them of being able to meet their own needs. So it's kind of it's a we're talking about a deep psychological interplay between people. Um, but I think that if we really try to put all the effort into focusing on the other person instead of ourselves, and if both people do that, then that's where you have harmony. That's where you have the best quality relationships.
Well, again, it falls back to leadership, and it falls back to being able to when you're dealing with someone who is chaotic or they're very highly emotional, very, very irrational and not logical. Like you may have a PMS She may be on her period, she may be pregnant, and just be very, very volatile during that moment. I think it's crucial as a man that you don't respond in kind and that you're observant of her and you're like, okay, well, um, we need to establish some boundaries here because I know that you're gonna fly off the handle off the slightest little thing I say, or maybe I forgot to do something and you're gonna get upset. So you need to establish those boundaries. And if she does get emotional, that's not the time to say, well, let's get a divorce and let's not see each other anymore just because you're having an argument, but understand that, okay, maybe before you react in kind and being able to control yourself. Don't be emotional just because she's being emotional. Being able to, as a man, being able to control yourself and say, look, um, what are you upset about? Are you on your period? You know, is there something that I'm not seeing that's bothering you? Find out, investigate instead of reacting immediately. Be like, oh, okay. That's what I used to do that. When you were young, right? We were married, you were young, and you would react immediately. It would be immediately there would be what did you say? Did you say something? You say something? And then it just escalates from there. Then it just escalates because you get maybe a lack of disrespect. And then like, okay, she's gonna pop off, and then you're gonna pop off, and it's just gonna escalate. And now you're fighting in front of your kids, right? And who's the getting hurt is the kids. And this is something we're trying to avoid as men. So I think it's very important that not only that we think about the other person, but we be emotionally detached. Like I was in law enforcement before, and that's one of the things in domestic. People are fighting, they're screaming back and forth, and you kind of have to maintain peace and be emotionally detached because what happens is you start screaming, you start getting pulled into that energy is like a fire, it just escalates. So you as the leader, you need to bring it down. You need to bring it down a notch. And I think a lot of guys don't understand that because they're not in touch with themselves. So I think, in my opinion, that the emotional maintenance, emotional and mental health, your mental health maintenance, your emotional stuff, your spiritual stuff, that is just as important as your physical health, is getting out and getting in the gym and working out. And I think a lot of guys are afraid to talk about that stuff because they're afraid of what other people are going to think. And I would like to know what you think about your thoughts about that as far as maintaining the emotional attachment, being able to control the situation, and also mental health, taking care of yourself. How do you get to that point? What advice do you give to the viewers?
Um, okay, so with the emotional health or maturity and then the psychological well-being, the best answer I can give for that, and this is through my own experience, is just educate yourself. That's the easiest way to become emotionally mature is to learn about and study and figure out what are the different types of emotions and where do they come from? Why are they there? In my journey, I've found the universal list of human needs, and that was a game changer for me personally because I was able to learn about all of the different needs that we all have.
Which are
It's like, oh man, there's a list of about a little more than 20 or so that I have.
really?
But I can name off a few of them. So you have, let's see, you have safety, stability, you have nurturance, you need sustenance, you need to have food, things like that. These are basic primal needs. You need acceptance to feel like you belong somewhere. Generally, most everybody needs respect. There's the need for play, like spontaneity. There's the need for there's your physical well-being. Well, everybody has the need for to be physically healthy. Um, let's see. There's the need for connection with others. Um, there's the need for compassion or to be to be able to care for others and then have others care for you. Um, those are just the primary ones that pop off the top of my head. So there's a lot of them there, but we can use some of this. Okay, so take your lady friend that might be at that time of the month. I'm gonna venture into that territory, which I'm a guy. I don't know. I ain't never had one, but I have heard from plenty of females the experiences that they have, and I do know
And
from
you've been in
certain,
relationships before, so
yeah, and I know from certain literature that what's happening with that is during that time of the month, their bodies are going through a hormonal
we got 8 minutes.
whirlwind. Yeah. So their body's going through a hormonal whirlwind, right? Their emotions are all over the place. They honestly they don't have control over that because of the hormonal imbalance at that time. So what they need is safety and security to feel understood, to be feel connected, to feel accepted during that chaotic time. So if a man is able to say, "Okay, you're going through a thing right now. I'm still here. I'm not going to leave. Whatever you say or do, I'm going to be the rock against the waves, right? And don't worry, I got you." Well, if he can stay firm and stay strong in those times without getting all emotional and with causing a bunch of problems or kind of how you said reacting, if he reacts and makes elevates the issue, if he can stay calm and firm through that storm, we'll call it, then whenever things calm down for her, that's going to substantially increase her trust in him, her faith in him, the security that she feels with him. It's going to strengthen the connection that they have. It's going to strengthen her belief or her understanding of how accepted that she is. That's only going to do good, in my understanding. So I think that's a big part of it. So you're right. We need to educate ourselves on all these different facets, and the more we educate ourselves about how we work as human beings and on a psychological and physiological level, the more or better equipped we are to develop that firm foundation to where we ourselves are not affected by someone else's emotional whims or whatever that may be.
In Russia, there's like these orphanages, and I was talking to a guy, and he adopted one of these Russian girls, and he was telling me he's like, the Russian babies, like they have to pay money. They're a lot more expensive than the Chinese babies because there's Chinese babies, but he said he wanted a blonde-haired uh, baby, and he's a Russian baby. I said, "Oh, that's interesting." So he said that he had to go to Russia to go pick up this kid that he adopted, and in this orphanage it's run by these nuns. And they go in there, they see the babies there, and the babies are not crying. And I'm like, wow. I said, that is, I said, why? He said, because they never, listen to this. He said they never hold them. They never hold them. They give them like food. So they know what time they're getting the food, kind of like a dog. So they know what time they're getting the food, but they never ever get held. Can you believe that? And I said, why? Why don't they? He said, because if you hold one, they're gonna want that. If they don't know what they're missing, they're not gonna be completely naive. So they have strict rules not to hold the babies. But it's interesting you should say this is a need, because there's some people, like that are orphanage, like they're like emotionally retarded. They're like detached and they don't understand about we've got 5 minutes, so we got to bring this to a close. But they don't understand like how important it is that these are subconscious needs that will come out later as they become adults. And
Yep.
I don't know if you knew that or you knew any information about that.
I've never heard of that particular um, scenario or circumstance, but that's an interesting thing to think about. But I definitely agree. I think that if we don't have needs met, what's going to happen is we're going to find a way to meet that need, even if we don't even know exists, even if we have no idea about it and have no clue how it works, and we just simply don't understand it at all.
And how will,
Generally, we're going to find a coping mechanism for that specific need.
like
And
what?
a lot of times it's going to be a some sort of negative self harming coping mechanism. I mean, you look at um, a lot of drug use is generally it's needed. I mean, okay, so personally, I've met people that the only reason why they use is because they want to feel like they're part of a group. They feel like they're connected with the
Drugs?
people. They feel like they're being accepted into a crowd, right? There's also the need for play, like I said earlier, the spontaneity, the joy. We all have that need for that, and a lot of times drug use does that. There's the need for to feel like you belong, which is kind of along the lines of connected there. Um, you have things like the need for connection. If you don't have the romantic connection or some sort of intimate connection with somebody, a lot of times that leads to pornography use. So we find ways to cope with these needs. You can look at video games. Video games is another big one too, which meets a lot of those needs. So it's we need to find healthy ways to meet these needs. All these needs can be met in many different ways, but generally, if we don't do it intentionally, our chances of um, developing a negative way or a negatively impactful way of meeting these needs are pretty high.
Yeah, I think that's the key right there. That is the key, is it has to be intentional. For
Mm-hmm.
me, it's prayer and reading the Bible because sometimes I'm like, hey, I don't feel like reading the Bible. I don't feel like praying. So what I'll do is I'll read Psalms. Oh God, creating me a clean heart and renew a right spirit within me, or
Right.
and I'll just like, I can be under the shadow of the feathers of the Almighty. And I just think about that. I think about that I'm under God's protection and I'm under his care and everything's going to be all right. Where the dollar could crash, we could have chaos, but I'm under God's protection, and the whole thing about the spiritual connection is intentional. And I think that's what it is we have to be intentional or it's not going to work. If you're just like you're going to say these prayers and you're not expecting an answer, you're just going to say it and then boom, and I'm out. That's like I'm giving you a phone call. I'm going to say what I got to say and then boom, hang up the phone on your face. Well, maybe you got something to say too. They say that, like I'm holding up my phone because I got my Bible in it. They say God's word it speaks to mankind. It's the channel for mankind. So I think that's important. I found and then we'll wrap it up because we gotta close out here. But I think what it is also I would like to add in addition to what you were talking about reading books. I think it's important to make an appointment with God. Like to say, look, between 7 and 7:30, I'm going to watch the sunrise. I'm going to turn my phone off and I'm going to say a prayer and I'm going to just wait to see if the Holy Spirit will speak to me. And I think if you're intentional in doing that, okay, it's telling me Zoom is getting me telling me I got it kicking us off. If you're intentional when you're doing that, God will speak to you. God will speak to you not an audible voice, but He'll speak to you in your heart, and so you'll get that intuition. All that's from God. I'll give you the last word.
No, I think that's pretty good. I think the only thing I would add to that is if you're going to pray, pray with intentionality. Don't just ask for something or pray for something without the intent to do something to try to achieve it. It would be, to use your phone analogy, it would be like, hey, I got a question for you. Picking up the phone, not even dialing your number and just asking the question without dialing the number. Like you got to put forth a little bit of effort to get the answer to the question, right? So,
Love it.
yeah,
Love it.
that's all I would add.
Right. And this.